That's okay. I'll just introduce you while you're doing that.
Okay.
Um, Hi, I'm Martha. I'm with OurBrainBank. I am a staff member here. I don't have GBM myself, but my dear friend Jessica, who is joining us today, I'm so happy. Jessica is going on 5 years as a GBM survivor. And I think we have a few new people today. So that's wonderful. We do this the second Tuesday of every month. And also, if you are a patient or care partner in the US or UK, we invite you to join our study. It's using a free smartphone app. I'll just bring it up on my phone. And every day you track your health indicators and symptoms using this colorful motif. And then you can look at your data. You can chart things over time, graph things. You can see relationships between your treatment and how you're feeling, how you're sleeping, how you're eating, your level of appetite. And the data that you generate is being looked at by research scientists and to see how we can find new insights. And actually, Yaron, if that's something you could, I know it's not part of your presentation, but if you could just talk a little bit on, like, I know you're collecting data too there in Canada,
Yeah.
and what you want to see in the data and why it's important for people to join studies like yours or ours, or there's several other ones too that anyone can join. Are you ready to share a screen, Yaron?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
So this is Yaron Butterfield. Yaron Butterfield is an extremely long-term GBM survivor. How many, is it 15 years?
This coming February, it'll be 17.
17, wow, that's amazing.
Wow.
And also, I don't know if it's coincidentally or not coincidentally, but Yaron is a research scientist studying cancer genomics, and he'll tell you
Yeah.
more about his work when he starts his presentation.
So, do you see my presentation?
No.
Okay, so I have to, share screen, right?
You should see the green share screen at the bottom, and then if you have it open on your desktop.
Okay, now what do you see?
Perfect. I see brain cancer.
Look at here, hello.
You see brain cancer? I like to think my cancer's gone.
Yeah.
I like blue.
Oh, and I could ask everyone to just mute yourselves while Yaron is talking, unless you want to ask a question, because we have dogs and cats and kids and who knows what else. So everyone mute, please. And then if you need to ask a question, go ahead and unmute yourself.
You want to mute you, Jessie? Can you mute you? You want to
Are we
mute?
okay?
Something.
Should I start? Okay, I got introduced, but just again, my name is Yaron Butterfield. I've been a cancer genomics researcher for 20 years now. Actually, that was August 2000 when I started. And we're in Vancouver, Canada. Am I the only Canadian here? Very beautiful place. And I got a question. Do you see my mouse arrow? Okay, so this is Vancouver. I actually live over here, right there, actually, and I was born over there near the mountains in Vancouver. This is where I work. We have BC Cancer. There's a BC Cancer clinic. There's a research center kind of over here. This is that, and another center over here. So I work at this place specifically, but we're all kind of connected. And that's actually something that helps in where I am, in that we have a research center and a cancer health clinic, all like walking distance. Okay, so I'll talk a bit about brain cancer in general, some about treatment and analysis, and then my own experience. And if I whip through some slides, it's more because it might be, I think, maybe less relevant to this talk, but I kept them all here. So if questions arise that might make sense to go back and bring up one of those slides, then they're there. This is not my cancer, by the way. It's just a general picture. So what is cancer exactly? It really is mutational changes in genes in our cells. and these changes happen over time. There's eventually a growth in a tumor, and then it could be cancer. And what I've seen many Facebook groups I'm part of comes up a lot. Basically, can it be, is it hereditary or not? Is it basically, especially with GBM, which is full of mutations, it can
It's
be
Ed, it should be starting very soon.
Sorry?
Oh, Jessica,
No, sorry.
mute yourself, please. Everyone
Sorry.
mute yourself, please. Thank you.
Is there a question? No? Okay. I mean, cancer is built on mutations, and those mutations can accrue over time, or they can come, it can be hereditary, or it could be a combination of both. So that's how it starts. And you can have something called intra-tumor heterogeneity, where there's normal cells that become cancer cells, and it can be all kinds of different genetic clones, meaning a certain set of cells with a certain genetic change can be completely different than another set of cells. And then you eventually have a tumor. And again, this is general for cancer, but I'm really specifically talking about brain cancer. And part of the reason it's so hard to treat is you have a polyclonal tumor. So it's built of cells that are actually different from each other. And the reason things are difficult, so a lot of people start, maybe an example is with temozolomide after diagnosis. Now, you could say that the temozolomide might kill these blue ones, which is a big bulk of this tumor. So the temozolomide kills these blue ones. These pink ones might be resistant. So when you first get treatment, the tumor really shrinks, killing all these blue cells, so to speak. And then we're happy, the tumor shrunk, everything's good. And then there's a recurrence, which is common in brain cancer. And that's because then these other cells that were not affected by the chemo, they now grow and you have a new tumor. But your new tumor isn't necessarily, even if it looks like the same shape, it isn't necessarily genetically the same as the first one, which is why often the first chemotherapy drug taken does not work a second time. And this comes to play in my story. Okay, I kind of discussed this. Basically, you got your normal tissue, you got changes that lead to mutations, which could be single amino acid mutations in the gene. It could be a whole chromosome that gets altered. You got it. So this shows what I just said. You have a tumor, and it could be even here. It's just simple example of there's this one cell. Make sure all of your sound is off unless you have a question. So here's a tumor, and it shows one red cell, all these blue cells. You have a treatment, and there's a great response. All these blue cells are killed, but that red one was resistant, and now you have a recurrence of a whole different genetic makeup. So there is a sound coming out somewhere there. Anyways, there are quite a few signs of brain cancer, and I know a lot of things could be signs of something else, which is also make things difficult. That there's various types of, I mean, if you feel dizzy, confused, or forget things, you might not think, oh, I must have a brain cancer or a tumor in my brain. But anyways, here's a list of various things that could be signs of brain cancer. And for brain cancer in general, they can be primary or secondary. Primary meaning it originated in the brain. Or secondary could mean it originated from other cells in the body that moved into the brain. But for primarily this talk, I'll be concentrating on brain tumors. And for brain tumors, they can be benign or malignant. And ironically, where I live, my neighbor had a benign brain cancer. And they're slower growing, very well-defined borders and don't invade surrounding tissues, whereas malignant do. And there are actually many different types of brain cancer, a lot. Some of these might be ones that more often occur, where are we, in children, like those. Then there's gliomas, which are very common. Dendroglioma, because that was part of one of my studies I get into. There's different classifications of GBMs or gliomas, and these kind of change over time. For example, there's starting to be new ways to classify basically if you have an IDH, which is a gene, if there's a mutation in a very specific point in the DNA or not. And classic treatment, so, is to have a surgery and then chemotherapy combined with radiation. And with, for my story, I actually never had surgery. It was deemed by most institutes or doctors that my tumor is too deep. So we actually, here in BC, that's what they felt. And we sent my biopsy to a few other clinics, John Hopkins, Sloan Kettering, and a place in Toronto. And all of them, except one, said, yeah, don't do surgery. So I had chemo and radiation. Chemotherapy, a classic one coming, well, the combination of this drug, temozolomide or TMZ, or the market name Temodol. This drug was shown by Roger Stoop, and he called, a lot of people may have heard the Stoop protocol, but by combining this drug with the radiation tends to do better. What is going on here? That's just unreadable, right? Sorry about that. Again,
like modern art.
Well, I am an artist, so I'll mention that. Yeah, okay. This slideshow was created in Windows, but I'm displaying this in Ubuntu. So, okay, we'll ignore that. Oh, sorry about this. This happens more often, but this is my artsy, how is the gene science applied to cancer? So I work in basically gene science or genomics. And as I said before, cancer really results from a change in one cell that then can grow. And what we try to understand is the exact processes behind these changes and eliminating the cancer cells before they spread. Whoops. So in the context of where I work, I don't know, there's a fish there, but when I first started working actually in genetics at the Genome Center, we sequenced all kinds of things, trees and frogs, and my most favorite is our wine project where we sequence grapes. But anyways, our institute has more and more and more moved into cancers very specifically, and you'll see that later. But when I first started, there was a type of a sequencing called Sanger sequencing, and this is a case where we get large, big chunks of DNA and do the sequence. And it took quite a while, and we'd have a whole bunch of big sequences. But this thing, they still call it next generation sequencing, but this is really something that came out in 2010 or even a bit before that. And it changed the technology completely in that it created a whole bunch of smaller sequences, but millions of them. So, and faster to create them. So we suddenly had this shift where we can get whole genome sequencings done on people but then also needed a whole other sense of technology to deal with it. And that's where I work with the data coming out of the DNA.
Hey,
Yes.
I really want to join now, but unfortunately I have the doctor. So this sounds fascinating, so we'll catch up. I got to see my doctor now. That's
Jessica?
great.
Bye.
Lovely to hear from you.
Lovely to see you.
Cheers.
Great to see you. That was Jessica, right?
Yeah, that was Jessica Morris, the founder of OurBrainBank.
Really happy to see her.
Yeah.
We had both attended a conference in Bethesda last year, so it was great to hang out with Jessica. So again, there's the sample goes to the lab. There's sequencing, get different reads, and then we try and that are all cut up, and we put it together and try and find out what's going on. And again, yeah, I work in the analysis part. I wrote a piece of software to do that. Go past here. This is a highlight for me in that I actually worked very specifically. I had played a high role in a different kind of brain cancer called oligodendroglioma. And I'll never forget the moment I worked late. I was at my computer, and I just was working with data, and then suddenly I saw a whole bunch of what's called a CIC is a gene, a whole bunch of cases where there was a mutation in that gene, and that was a discovery which we actually won an award from the Journal of Pathology as a key paper. So that was very exciting to actually be involved in the study of brain cancer. This was in 2012, about 8 years since my own diagnosis. There are a lot of other things involved, different applications of the gene that could play a role. Two that I'll just mention here. I often see in Facebook people asking if they are methylated or not. Are they mutated? And what they're referring to is a methylation of a certain gene and then a mutation in another. And I'll go past these. Oh, okay, I gotta fix these, but oh, this is interesting. On my other screen, it shows it properly. Okay. Anyways, basically, methylation is there's a small group of a methyl group called just CH3, which is attached to the start of a gene, and if one has that on this gene, it's good because this gene MGMT creates a protein that kind of negates the effectiveness of temozolomide. If it's methylated, then that gene no longer creates a protein, and then temozolomide works a bit better. And it's known if you have that methylation, again, like I said, on the promoter at the start of the gene, the prognosis is better. And then another classic thing people want to know is, do they have the IDH1 mutation? When they say mutation, it's a mutation in this gene IDH1 and at a very specific spot. So the gene itself will have a lot of mutations compared to what other people have, but a very specific location is important, which is, I mean, me as a scientist, it's just fascinating that in a genome of millions of bases, that one single base in one single gene, having that mutation, also you do better with chemotherapy. What's going on here? Oh, here we go. This I just put it up for two reasons, because there's a viewer of the genome which I use all the time, and it's just showing it. This is the gene IDH1. These are the the bases, and that's the amino acid. again, this specific mutation at this specific spot in the tumor might not exist in the normal. And if you have this, it's a better prognostic factor. And here's just another example. It's less common to have the mutation. 10% have it. 90% do not. And what's also typical is younger people tend to get it rather than older people. And like I mentioned before, you can have whole chromosomal changes. Where I work, like I mentioned before, we're getting into kind of personal oncogenomics, where we sequence the tumor, we do analysis, we find changes, send a report back to the clinic, and they help make decisions on types of treatment. And this all kind of goes back to the fact, what I mentioned much earlier, how two tumors can be quite drastically different genetically. And here's just an example for a report. What time? Okay, I might fly through. There's a lot of new research, which is good. I'm quite interested in immunotherapy using the immune system. You need to find better ways to cross the drug to cross the blood-brain barrier. Try and find new drugs or a combination of drugs. Continue to look at genes involved. There's so much we don't. There's a lot we don't know. So we need to continue that research. I know people have talked about medical cannabis. At the time this was done, there really wasn't any specific human trial. I might need to update this because I know since then there's been some papers that do talk about a benefit of taking the cannabis during treatment. I obviously did not. So another area where I am studying is the use of artificial intelligence to use software that'll analyze each tumor and potentially come up with even better, more accurate analysis of what the nature of the cancer. And basically artificial intelligence, what it does, it looks at a lot of prior data. It needs a lot. And then based on that, it can make decisions on new things it sees. And we're hoping that can lead to better assessments of the genome and then hence better treatment. I think I'll go through this quickly. Like I mentioned, you need a lot of patient scans to know that for this patient, this is what was going on and whatnot. And then we can see with new patients, it could search a database and come up with one thing or two things and probably more, but it would be could hopefully lead to a more accurate diagnosis and also a much quicker diagnosis. Yeah, accurate, could be more cost effective. Anyways, this is research in early stages, which is why I'm excited. So just in terms of brain cancer, I'm just going to mention a couple people that have had it. People have heard of John McCain and then Joe Biden's son. Recently, the singer for Roxette had it. And I will say, most of these talks I've done for a Canadian audience, just curious, how many people have heard of Gord Downie from the Tragically Hip?
Yeah.
Anyone? Hey.
Also, Neil Peart from Rush. He had GBM.
Ah, okay. I mentioned Gord Downie because he was part of a band that was made it big, really big in Canada. They didn't do so well in the States. They were quite popular in Australia, but they were probably the most loved band in Canada. A lot of his songs were about Canadian history and different things. So when he was getting treatment, I wrote a letter to him that was published in the Toronto Star. Oh, I got a little shirt here too, tragically. Yep. So I shared my story with him to give him hope. Unfortunately, he passed away within the year. So put up this map for a couple reasons. In the spring of 2003, so it was April 2003, I helped put the Genome Center on the worldwide map, because I also mentioned this because this is a coronavirus, actually, that me and the center were studying, not cancer. We use the same technology of looking at DNA. And we were rushing to get it published, and we wanted to beat the CDC in Atlanta. And I'll never forget, I basically stayed up on my own in the lab till almost 4 in the morning. And I never forget, at about 2:15, I got the whole sequence in front of me on a computer. And there was literally no one else in the lab. I kind of screamed out, and we ended up being the first in the world to put the sequence out. And yes, us Canadians were happy that we beat the CDC in Atlanta. But yeah, we made worldwide headlines. There's a report in China. That's a local newspaper here. And that's when I was young. That's me in the head of the lab. So remember for a second here, this was on the 3rd floor of the BC Cancer Agency, where all this exciting stuff happened. My computer's there. I was a lot younger. So life was good back then. This was very exciting. I was at a career high. I had 10 bioinformaticians under me that I was managing, and I was very busy. I was playing ice hockey a couple times a week and doing taekwondo and yoga. And I actually felt, though, something was wrong. Something needed to change. And I actually bought a ticket to go to India. And I remember that. So at this time I was 29, and I'd read that the Buddha at 29 left his family and went and sat on a tree to get enlightened. And I thought, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to India and go to this tree. And I actually had a friend who was already in India, so he's going to pick me up at the airport. But then something told me to cancel the ticket. And it's good I did, because on February 23rd, 2004, I collapsed. And that is not actually me, in case you're wondering. So, whoops. Yeah, what's going on here? There we go. So they discovered, so this is, February 23rd, 2004. This is my first MRI scan. They did right away. So I collapsed in the morning. Looks like this is done at 2 o'clock. And there's a tumor. And what I realized a lot later, see the tumor there? It's in the shape of a heart. So I thought, okay, that's heartwarming. That's nice. So again, some of my first scans, different views, and look, and actually this is a few days later. Oh God, why I gotta fix that. I apologize for this. It's interesting.
Don't worry about it. Technology all fails us sometimes.
Well, the words are there. One of the first, like I said, you'll see I'm an artist too. So here I'm being artistic with the language. Basically, it's just saying that I presented at this hospital, and a lot of friends came to visit. I had CT and MRI scans. And actually, I'll tell you something kind of funny, that I went to visit the physician who was going to do the biopsy, and his name is actually Brian Toyota. And then after the biopsy, when we went to see him, I mentioned that I was looking forward to see what Dr. Honda says. And everyone said it's Toyota, not Honda. And I said, okay, but I had a professor in university who was Dr. Honda, and that was my way of excusing myself. And so this is a stereotactic, this was a biopsy, and probably the most painful thing ever for me was the head frame that was attached for the biopsy. And so here are the pathologies. So if you recall, I did a research paper with someone on oligodendroglioma, and the neuropathologist on the paper with me was Stephen Yip. And maybe about 6 or 7 years, around that time, I got to know him through the analysis for that paper. I actually said to him, you know what? I've survived now, would have been 7, 8 years. And I said, you know, maybe I was misdiagnosed and I didn't actually have glioblastoma, but a different cancer. And he said, okay, come to my office. And so I went there the next day, and he brought up the pathology slides for my cancer. Here's one. And I never forget this. He said, you actually had the most clear and most obvious GBM. And this is what some of the pathology looks like. You may have heard like GBM is very heterogeneous. Again, which that's part of the reason it's so hard to treat. You have giant cells and bizarre tumor cells and big fat blood cells. This is not how a normal cell in the brain looks like. Something called pink necrosis, where you have cells that don't even have DNA. It's just, it's crazy. So yeah, I was diagnosed with glioblastoma multiforme, GBM, which might have a small element of oligodendroglioma, interestingly, which was the cancer that I published a paper in. A lot of people I noticed on Facebook said that they have GBM4, glioblastoma 4. The thing is, what glioblastoma multiforme really is a grade 4 astrocytoma. So there's no glioblastoma grade 3 or 2, or it's always grade 4. Time-wise, okay, I'm gonna go a bit quicker. Here's another view that showed I had the IDH1 mutation. There's what I mentioned before, the Stoop protocol, where combined chemo and radiation. I had treatment. Oh, here the text is fine. That's strange. I had treatment at the BC Cancer Agency, temozolomide and the chemo. But what was interesting is after chemo, after about 3 weeks, I had a very, or I'll get to that. Here's a picture of me in the radiation table. Here's a picture of now had some radiation, had some hair loss there. That's my twin brother, who's, well, ever since, in amazing support. So when, in terms of the chemo, I had a very unfortunate or response to the chemo, in that it really affected me, and I had almost something called grade 4 toxicity, where the platelets were dropped below a normal range. So I actually was hospitalized. And if you remember where I helped sequence and put together the SARS genome, that was on the 3rd floor of BC Cancer. Almost a year later, I'm on the 5th floor of the cancer center getting transfusions, platelets, which had dropped to almost a fatal level from the chemotherapy. I hope you ignore that. I gotta call. So I spent 2 nights at BC Cancer Agency getting platelets. There's my mom who came to visit, and it was a tough time in a way. That what's interesting, we were worried that I could no longer take the chemotherapy. And I remember thinking later, I wonder if that was potentially a good sign, that it showed I was very sensitive to the chemo. So we'll see. The response to treatment, like what I mentioned before, that the temozolomide rarely works a second time, but that had to be considered because I had a cancer recurrence in the fall of 2005. And because cancer rarely, the temozolomide rarely works a second time for the reason I showed, that the cells, the new cells in the new tumor are genetically different and different than the first cells that were sensitive to temozolomide. Because of that fact, I was put on a clinical trial called lapatinib. And the kind of, I don't know what you'd say, the funny thing or the unfortunate thing or the interesting thing, but I was on this drug during the time when I got married. And in a video where I was getting married, you could hear my watch alarm going off to tell me to take the drug in the video of my marriage. And unfortunately, the drug completely failed. My tumor doubled in size. Oh God. Yeah, this kind of describes how my chemo treatment was after that. That's how it looked, FYI. But because the clinical trial failed, they put me back on temozolomide as a last case measure. And like I said before, maybe because I was so sensitive before and I didn't finish taking it, that in the recurrence, the new cells were also still sensitive to that drug in a way a little bit different than perhaps is often the case, that the new tumor is genetically a lot different than the first one. So I basically took, I did 1 week of chemotherapy, 1 week per month for the first 8 months of 2006. And a scan in September 06 showed that everything was clear. And I have not done any form of treatment for the brain cancer since. What did I do in my time off? Because I had to take time off work. Well, my team actually won the championship for the first time that year. Here's me holding a cup when we won a championship. I didn't actually play. I tried to, but when I got in the ice, I didn't even start this is interesting because I hadn't even started treatment yet. But the tumor affected my play. But it's fascinating how, I don't show this, but basically what happened is on February 21st was the last game of the season. And I scored 5 goals, the most I'd ever scored. 2 days or a day and a half later, I collapsed. And before getting any treatment, we had the championship game, and I could barely skate. So the seizure itself affected my brain and balance and everything so dramatically with not even getting treatment that I couldn't play. I tried to do the very last 30 seconds. We were up 4-0, so that was fine. And we won. In 2005, I actually ran a marathon in Iceland. And sometimes I feel perhaps I pushed my body too much. I did get a stellar time. I did finish the marathon. But then after, I had nights where I partied and drank beer, was up late and crazy stuff. And then a few months later, they had a recurrence of the cancer. Sometimes I wonder if I pushed myself too much. I don't know. Anyways, 2008, I had a daughter. Her name's Hannah. I do a lot of art. That's one of myself and my twin brother. And people ask, what helped me? And I wrote some various things here: support from family and friends, prayer, and various types of supplements, and dreams give me hope. And I'm a huge dreamer. I'll mention again something about that, and diet, and doing art. Here's a very recent art I did of flowers, but in the stem of the flowers, these are DNA strands, and these are amino acids, basically. So in an IDH1 mutation, you would have 3 that make an amino acid three bases with one mutation. Anyways, so there's that. Here's some art I did. This is interesting in that so I'm going to say something about this. During treatment, I had a very powerful dream where essentially death started approaching me. An angel kind of just suddenly appeared and was kind of moving its hands around my head, and then death gradually moved away. So one reason I put this up was show my art, but also that I am a strong believer that the brain can affect your cells. And there's just so much evidence. I mean, if you're stressed, you get sick. Or to me, I do find extreme stress, and you'll have to wait till my memoir comes out to find the details of that. But extreme stress potentially created mutations in my brain that could have led to the brain cancer. Then I feel it can work in reverse. So I have thoughts about where this dream arose. Could it have come from a higher power or not? Then I think it doesn't matter. The fact is that I woke up from this dream basically telling me I'm gonna survive. I'm gonna be fine. And my point here is it doesn't matter where the dream came from. My own thoughts, a higher power was giving me a message. It didn't matter. What mattered is deep down, I felt I was going to be fine. Not just some fluffy, yeah, I'm going to be all right, no problem. But deep down to the point where the thoughts affected my cells and helped eliminating the cancer cells. I am a strong believer in that. And I actually had another dream, but I'll get into another time. But I had a dream of an elephant flicking between an elephant and a dream. I created this piece of art to somehow try and represent that. That's the elephant there and the camel there. And there's this, I look in dream symbolism, and there's some really good meaning behind this symbol of an elephant, a camel, and a dream. Here's another piece of art I created of a brain, all this negative stuff with cancer, but then positive thoughts really help. So a number of years later, many years later, actually it was, just a few years ago, I got into a hereditary cancer program. So a lot of people ask, the brain cancer, is it hereditary or not? Or it must be because one of my parents had it. Again, as I mentioned before, it can happen. It can be the case or not. So I actually was part of a program. There's something called this Lee-Fromeni syndrome, where you could have the inheritance of a mutation from the parents that could result in various cancers, including brain cancer. So I was part of that study to see if I had that. And because my mom had both breast and ovarian cancer, I was really hoping I didn't, because I didn't want her to feel it wouldn't be the case, but I think she would have felt she's part of the reason I got brain cancer. Thankfully, that was not the case. I didn't actually have this mutation, so there's really no connection between the cancer my mom had and my brain cancer. But other cases, it could be. So it's really depends. That's that. More analysis. So I like to give back. I've done various ways of volunteering and a whole bunch of things, and I don't want to appear selfish doing volunteer work, but I do know that when you help others, it helps you. It helps you. That's you can look it up in the Bible, but that's just the nature of life, essentially. But one big thing is myself and another person started a team called the Brainiacs for an annual 2-day 230-kilometer bike ride. I don't know how to convert that to miles off the top of my head, so sorry about that. That's my twin brother and I. Zero. And our team we created, we called ourselves the Brainiacs, and we've raised a lot of money to that team. I've answered questions in various support groups and whatnot. I've acted as a patient navigator. And then we get into people who live a long time, maybe the cancer is gone, but effects of radiation linger. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of going past half hour. I'll quickly try and wrap this up.
That's okay, Yaron. It's really fascinating.
Okay, so long-term effects of brain cancer. Well, one big thing for me is I have moments of fatigue. So if I fall asleep during this talk, don't get mad at me, okay? Whoops. Fatigue is one major issue. What's interesting, I've become a very slow eater. I mean, how do you explain that? I don't know. But in family dinners, which we haven't had for a while because of COVID, my mom and I end up being the last ones to finish our meals. And it suddenly happened after I got the cancer. I find I tend to care more about people, in fact, I kind of enjoy life more. And I just seem to find I enjoy this one thing. Nature more. For like, I might walk by and there's so much beauty out there. It's in the leaves and the flowers, and I just stop and I notice these things, which is interesting. Okay, so the fatigue and balance has been affected, what's also interesting, I had mentioned I scored 5 goals in the last game a day and a half before I collapsed. But before I collapsed with the brain cancer, I was pretty much, I don't want to brag, but I was captain and one of the best players on the team. After the cancer, I really became the worst player in the team. And I remember back then, in 2006, 7, 8, guys on the team would say, okay, you had a lot of trauma, you'll get better. Never ever happened. I pretty much was the worst ever since. But the guys are good, keeping me on the team. Compromised hearing in my left ear. This is, for me, the bulk of the radiation was over here, so that makes sense. And also a double vision, an issue here. So what's interesting is 10 years after radiation, so in 2014, actually, it also was appeared during one of my hockey games, that in the third period, I just started to notice something was off. And double vision. And at first I thought, okay, this is great. Now my team has twice as many players as the other team. But the double vision works both ways. So there were twice as many of the other team too. But it's interesting. At the end of that game, my brother was worried. My twin brother was on the team. He was worried, and maybe this is a potential of the cancer coming back, having the double vision. So anyway, long story short, essentially led to my neuro-oncologist telling me that the double vision was due to damage to a cranial nerve, which was a long-term effect of radiation. So that's one thing. I've actually had 2 eye surgeries, and it's much better. It's not gone. Over the years, I had a lot of fun with the double vision, and I could really play around with it. So if there's there's a bald dude here, and beside this bald dude is a woman with great hair, I can actually transplant her hair onto the bald dude and give him a nice head of hair. Just through playing around with the double vision in the eyes, it's just fascinating. But I'd rather, not have that, because I haven't been, basically, pretty much since then, I had to stop playing on my team because I continued a bit, but what it led to is I had a few concussions because I just get slammed into the boards, even when there's no player there to slam me into the boards. It's interesting, and it's probably why I was first discovered. It was during hockey, and that's because, day to day, your eyes are in a more comforting zone. You're looking down, but during hockey, your eyes are so quickly moving back and forth, and that's why I think it happened in the third. So during the course of the game, my eyes were getting more and more tired, and because I had the double vision, it just became so pronounced by the third period. So, anyways, I can't wait to get back. But so I was actually planning to go back to work. I'm off right now, but I was planning to go back earlier this year. I felt ready to go. Double vision's much better. I feel great. And then in March this year, I had kind of a partial seizure. It was another chapter in my memoir. It was weird. Anyways, although I freaked out and thought, had the cancer come back, basically that was not the case. What happened is I had what's called a subdural hematoma. So this was, like I said, just this year in March. And what it is blood between a big chunk of area of blood between the brain itself and the skull. So it really, really affected me. I had 2 1-week stays at the hospital. And there was one moment where I could barely walk, and I'll never forget this. I was sitting in bed and thinking, I know it was irrational because I was told things will get better with the inflammation when it's gone. But still, one night I was in the hospital room in bed. I couldn't move my right side at all. And I just thought, am I ever going to walk again? I'm going to be in a wheelchair or what? So I healed a lot over time. That was not the case. The blood didn't actually, the goal was to see if the blood would get self-absorbed and then I'd be fine. And that way I would avoid surgery. Unfortunately, it did not. So I did eventually have to have surgery. The first time I'd have brain surgery to get rid of this. And I recall when I was at the hospital, I said to the physicians, I said, well, this is in the same location where my brain tumor was in 2004. There must be connection. They said, oh, there's no connection, just happened to happen. But sure enough, I had an MRI this last August, which thankfully showed there was, again, no sign of the cancer. But my neuro-oncologist, who I've known now since I first started, so 17 years, he confirmed. He said, yes, it's another long-term effect of the radiation I had. So I think that's pretty much the end of my talk. I will show one last slide here. I have started a support group if anyone's interested. And just some details there. You can go to that website if you're interested. And I'll end the talk there. Here's another painting I did, and it's just that's me and my daughter. Those temozolomide pills. That's my brain, and that's kind of this cloud or whatever is like brain fog. This is the radiation to my head. There's 2 sons in a way, because this is also maybe me and my daughter. One of my super powerful dreams, including an elephant, if you recall. So this is another one of my paintings. So thank you for listening. Always want to appreciate my bosses at the Genome Center, the physicians and researchers that have helped me over the years, and other patients and my family. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you for listening. And feel free to ask any questions you might have.
Great.
Yaron, thank you so much.
Oh, Yaron, you're on. Sorry, I keep mispronouncing it. Can you stop the share so we can go back to seeing everybody?
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Oh.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Well.
Does it work?
Yeah. Thank you. That was so interesting. And I want to introduce you. Do you know a doctor who's also has a brain tumor named Courtney Burnett? Do you know about her?
No, I do not.
I'll definitely introduce you to, because she's also very into elephants, and she's very into meditation and Eastern medicine. And she actually, her tumor was, she did one of these chats a little while ago, and her tumor was diagnosed. She'd gone to work actually to study in Thailand, and then she had to diagnose herself, you know, in a Thai hospital, not speaking Thai. So she's writing a book too, actually. So
nice.
It's interesting that you're both really into elephants. That's funny. I had a question about the AI. I think that's really interesting way of the future, right? Has anyone been involved with any kind of, with their doctors? Because one of our medical advisors is actually using it at NYU Langone, Dr. Dan Oringer.
Sorry, are you asking me?
Oh, just if anyone has looked into this or knows about it or anything, or had your doctors bring it up, or no? I think it's really good to know.
My doctors haven't, but if you recall, I published a paper with a fellow named Stephen Yep. He was the neuropathologist who got me to come to his lab and look at my slides. He coordinates a monthly group looking at the use of AI in pathology to be able to more quickly determine what's going on. And at least where I am anyways, as far as I know, we're still at very early stages with, you know, there's no consistent official right now use of AI in patient treatment, but we're getting there. And in my time off right now, that's a huge part of what I'm studying.
Can I ask a question? Hi, is AI artificial intelligence?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to know if that's what you were referring to.
Yeah, AI is artificial intelligence. So basically, I write software code and making use of AI technologies to do analysis.
Yaron, I was just curious. You have a twin.
I do.
And how does that work with researchers wanting to study whether you have family tendencies and things like that? Is that just they salivate at the mouth or what?
I think there would be more interest if we are identical twins, but because we're fraternal, it's the same as if we were born different years.
Okay.
So there's been no interest, or really, it hasn't come up at all. You know, when my twin brother is not worried at all about maybe he's predisposed, and he's 5 minutes older than me. I'll never forget what you know. I hadn't been born yet, but it was super, super crowded in there. So I just kind of pushed him out, you know. And then after 5 minutes, it was kind of boring being all by myself. And then I emerged. But I definitely am lucky to have a twin brother. He's been with me every step of the way, and I remember one time. I actually lost my voice once, and we went back to the agency, my brother and I. And I remember one of the physicians was kind of tickled that we were twins, and he said, "Oh wow, I don't know what it's like to be a twin." And I remember we were like, "We have no idea what it's like not to. It's just that's our life. That's what we're so used to. So we're so close, but yeah, we're fraternal. So there's really no, no worry about that."
And you weren't the least bit concerned racking your brain around against the boards playing hockey?
Oh, later on after my
yeah. I mean, I fell off the ladder and I was terrified.
But,
you know,
I was concerned in a way in the knowing the effects of a concussion. I was not concerned that it could lead to the brain cancer coming back. But yeah, that's another part of the reason I've had to take some time off work to heal, is a combination of various things, including a couple concussions, and that's also why I haven't got back on the ice for that reason.
yeah, I get it.
Well, I know from my husband's family is half Canadian, so I know how hockey is, how important that is to all Canadians. We're getting up over an hour now, so I think we're going to have to wrap it up. I did want to say one more thing. Are you familiar, Yaron, with the group out in California called Research to the People? Have you heard of them?
I am not, no.
So definitely check them out. It's a nonprofit, and they are doing really interesting things, really kind of out of the standard medical academic box. And they one of the things they do is it's not just brain tumors, it's several different rare diseases, but they take one person and they want to do a GBM study. I mean, it's a little complicated why they haven't started, but they basically take one person's entire medical history, and they do the genomic analysis, and they get all the information. They have the scans, they have everything, and then they have these hackathons. Well, when people used to meet in hotels and lobbies, but they would get hundreds of people together, and they would all be on their laptops studying every single aspect of this one person, and then analyze different drugs and different treatments and what works for this and what works for that. And then they actually came up, not for GBM, unfortunately, but for another rare disease, they actually came up with an idea. And these people are not medical researchers or doctors. They can be intelligent high school students, computer scientists. And so I think you should definitely check them out. And they're really interesting. We've been talking to them a little bit, but I definitely think that's the way of the future, because the personalized medicine is so key to getting the right treatment. And if everyone's just getting standard of care, it works for some people, but it doesn't work as well for others.
Yeah, I think that could be something coming up in the future. I do want to emphasize that it's also very important in just the health field in general to not just treat the tumor, but to treat the whole patient. And I also think there's not enough in terms of lingering effects. There's a lot of concentration on the treatment, the going to the hospital, and then after that, kind of you're away from the health system. And then when the cancer comes back, or when you're dealing with all kind of side effects, that's less of an interest. Even if the tumor looks to be, decreased in size or gone, there's still many other issues.
Yeah, we've had more than one person in our group say that they had to stop the standard of care because that would have killed her before the cancer would have, which is just crazy. Okay, well, this has been really good. Anyone have any other questions? Okay, so this will go up on our YouTube, and next month we're going to have, actually you'll be interested in this one too, Yaron. There's a writer, he's a Harvard Medical School professor, and he's a writer, and he wrote a book called Cured, which is about the power of the placebo and the power of, as you were talking about with, healing thoughts and the power of the brain and the body. So no one's saying that you're gonna beat GBM by meditating, but it doesn't hurt. And so he'll be our guest, I think, in February, actually. So that should be a good one too. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for listening.
And I'll see you next month. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.